for the college at the time to have this ship named after it and have it go into the war effort. So when the war in Europe concluded on May 8, 1945, on May 11th, 1945, that was reported in the blue and gray. And as you can see, the news was not a lot of people jumping up and cheering and running around, and there weren't ticker tape parades here at Hood College, but it was a calm sense of relief that the war was over, that the college may be getting back to something more normal. But it was also, again, something of reverence. So as with all things at Hood at that time, there was a chapel service that was held later on to commemorate the end of that chapter of the war. But keep in mind that we were still fighting a tenacious battle against the Japanese in the South Pacific in 1945. So even though we were glad to see the war in Europe end, the war was still going on. So there was still a sense that this ship that we were building really needed to get into production and get out there and help with the war effort. Here is a picture of a typical gathering at the Bethlehem Fairfield shipyards for a christening ceremony. You would expect these type of crowds. It was a very big deal. All work would stop. Even though they were pumping out one ship a day, this was a big deal. So they would stop to take a look at that. They would go all into the different superstructures and watch the ships launch. You can imagine the pride that these workers had in producing these ships, and to a point where they were getting to the christening ceremony. So you can see cars here. This is where the platform guest would have gone up a very large tiered platform to get up higher on the ship for the christening ceremony. And you can see that here's that platform right here. They would go up to that. The day of the christening, the college had a number of guests, including alums and students who were representing the 4 classes at Hood at the time. That was a fancy lunch at the Belvedere Hotel in downtown Baltimore. Very swanky for the time. At the luncheon, the president, Henry Stair, who was also a pastor, he actually made a comment to some guests that were there that he referred to the ship's launch the same way that the guests that had been at the lunch, a couple who he had married, he used that, you know, I married this couple and they launched into matrimony, and just like that we're launching our ship onto the fair sea today. So just for him, that was his way of correlating you know, something that he had done at Hood with the launch of the ship. So here is President Stair and his wife, Alice Stair, who is actually going to be the person christening the ship. The person that is to their left, I believe that may be their daughter, but I think it was Krista and I, maybe, or someone else. It's his girlfriend. Yeah, that's good. No, I don't think it was his girlfriend. But his daughter was present. The Stair's daughter was present at the ceremony. So it makes sense that their daughter would be in the car, but again, this is one of those mysteries where with a little bit more research, help from alums where we can get that help, we might be able to identify some of the folks that we're seeing in these pictures. So the christening ceremony took place at 3:45 p.m. Again, you can see that here's Alice Stair. She had a very nice bouquet of roses. She had the christening bottle, which I have here at the front. And again, everyone is welcome to come and take a look at the artifacts here. This gentleman, I believe his name is J.M. Willis. He's the Master of Ceremonies for Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard. So he probably worked as a public relations person and did a lot of christening of ships. So he's the person that would say, now come this way, Mrs. Stair, and stand like this. And when the man calls on the phone and says, it's time to go, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, christen the ship, and you have to go. Because this had to be timed. And again, there was no master button that she was pressing. It was all a timing effort. And if you can imagine, the ship didn't have anything electronic to let it go. It had all of these beams that were holding it into place. So literally there were men with sledgehammers hitting the beams out at exactly the right moment to allow the ship to go into the water and not, you know, be going down the launchway in a incongruent fashion. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is one of the best pictures we have of the day. And again, this is where I'll give the disclaimer. In talking to Mrs. McAlpine earlier, I believe this person, because I read a newspaper report, from left to right, here are the people in the picture. They said that this person right here is Miriam Apple.
No.
But it's not Miriam Apple.
No.
So who is it?
Polly Smith.
No, this person right here.
I don't know.
We're going to figure out who that person is. But again, one of the mysteries. I thought it was Miriam Apple because I read the student newspaper, and this is for our journalists. You've got to get your facts right, or it's stuck in history for all time. But let me tell you who is here. Alice Dare, Polly Smith Moyer, class of 48. Unfortunately, she died, I believe, in 2010. Serene Quinn Colmus. She is sitting here with us today. Thank you for coming, Renee. Eleanor Gambrell Bowers, who is also still with us, but couldn't make it today, unfortunately. She was representing the class of 46. And Norma Jane Gressett Dancer. And unfortunately, she was class of 45, and she is not with us anymore. She passed in 2009. And then over here, off to the side, he kind of squeezed into the picture. You know, this is one of those rare opportunities where the president, stand over here, or get out of the way. He kind of squeezed into the picture at the last one. But that's President Henry Stair. And this is the person I thought was Miriam Apple, but that is not Miriam Apple. So we'll have to go back to the drawing board. Does anyone know who that is?
Polly Smith, isn't it?
No, this is Polly Smith.
The lady on the corner.
This person.
Yeah.
We'll figure out that mystery at some point.
Yeah.
But this is the actual moment, captured in time, of the christening bottle hitting the bow of the ship.
And you should have seen how hard she hit that thing. I thought she was going in the water.
We'll give it a moment. We might be able to do that.
Yeah.
This is the ship actually going down the launchway, and that is the ship in the water. So let's talk about the captain of the Hood Victory. And in the maritime tradition, they actually called the captain the master of the ship. He wasn't referred to as captain so much as he was referred to as master. That's sort of what the origins of that are. But again, the U.S. Maritime Merchant, the U.S. Merchant Marine was an essential part of World War II. Without that organization and the many sailors who sailed in the Merchant Marine, World War II and its outcome would not have been possible. So I cannot understate how important the Merchant Marine was to America. But this is Captain Louis M. Marangos. He was born in Greece. He started sailing in 1913. He sailed in World War II and became an American citizen after that. He was the captain of the USO Liberty ship in 1943, which did not get sunk, which is a very good thing. But he left that reluctantly, somewhat reluctantly, but knew that he was going on to a bigger and better ship, in that he was going to a Victory ship. And he was, in fact, the only captain on record that I found in my research who was the captain of the SS Hood Victory for the Merchant Marine. And when he wasn't a mariner, he lived in Elmhurst, Long Island, New York. So the ship had to leave after it hit the launch, left the launch bay and went into the water. It had to be outfitted, so it was only partially built. And part of this was its trials. It had to go out for trials in the Chesapeake Bay. So here it is on trials out in the Chesapeake Bay. But again, this is a little bit of me being very persnickety about history. I think this is a photo that was provided by Bethlehem Fairfield about the trials with this clipping on there. But if you look at the ship, there's no Hood Victory on the bow of it. So I don't believe that is actually the ship, but this was one of the items that was in our records. And it's speaking to the trial of the ship. This, however, is the ship. It's in Hoboken, New Jersey, New York area. where it went to be retrofitted as a troop ship. So it started as a cargo ship, and then it became a troop ship. So that is it in the summer of 1945. Here is actually, this ship was traced from the pattern for a ship called the USS Gage. It was a Victory ship that was actually part of the Navy. But it's the same layout and setup as the Hood Victory. You'll see that here they put quite a bit of troop berthing areas throughout the ship, which would have been cargo holds. They had a larger galley and a mess, and if I could show you, the ship did have guns, by the way. So it had AA guns, it had those on the front and the back. It also had AA guns on the top of the ship, and that was because at the time we were still at war. The ship could get attacked by air or by another naval vessel, so it had some protection. And again, this is the back side of the ship to show you. And this was where the largest gun on the ship, it was a 5-inch gun, was positioned. So again, that just gives you an idea of the conversion that had to take place, turning these cargo holds into troop holds. And again, here's the ship. As it's setting in dock. It's probably getting very close to launching on its maiden voyage at this time. So, I just thought I'd do a little bit of geospatial here and give you a sense of how big is the ship in comparison to something that we know, the road out here, very well. So if we were to take the ship and put it out here on the road in front of us, that is how large the ship is. Wow. Okay, that's how much space. It's 455 feet long, 62 feet wide. Now, if we put it out on Rosemont Avenue, we could park the ship on Rosemont Avenue. I usually park my car right about here before I go into work every day. This is what the ship is like.
Oh, wow.
So it was a large ship. So again, not only were we very proud of it, but it's a big ship. So the maiden voyage was from New York Harbor to Le Havre, France, September 27th through October 6, 1945. On this maiden voyage, the ship actually transported refugees. It wasn't just the crew. It was refugees from Europe who had left Europe because of the war, and it was taking those persons back to their homes. So those were the people that were the first persons on the ship. Unfortunately, there's very few records about who were those people, where were they from, what were their nationalities, what was their cultural or religious dispositions. All we know is that they were people that lived in the European theater of war who were evacuated or who had left before things got very dire there. So, this is probably the best part of the talk for me because as I'm wearing my uniform here, I'm representing the troops. It's such a wonderful and a proud thing that Hood did this great deed, which was we participated in bringing home our victorious soldiers from the European theater of war. And that's all that the Hood Victory did while it was in the Merchant Marine. It made multiple trips back and forth, bringing our soldiers back to the U.S. From Le Havre, France, was the main port to Boston Harbor. And so the first voyage was October 7th through October 15th, 1945. So again, just to give you a sense of distance, it's 3,500 miles from Le Havre, France to Boston. The blue line is actually Google telling me if I got on a plane from Boston to Le Havre, you can't really fly to Le Havre, you have to go to Cannes. That's a 16-hour plane trip that you would take direct. The ship did not go that quickly, and it went through some very rough seas. So you can imagine these Army soldiers who were very used to being shot at this point, but not very used to being on water. Some were jumping out of planes, some were riding in tanks. Not a lot of them were going across the sea in a ship, so they were a little ill during the trip. And again, one of the great things that was in our archive that I discovered is that we have an incredibly unique, a lot of Victory ships don't have this, record of the first voyage. And for our journalists here, Dr. Bertazzoni and Tim Jacobson and Catherine Orloff, the soldiers on the ship produced their own newspaper while on the voyage, and it was called Hoodwinks. Okay, so this is the inaugural issue, volume 1, on Tuesday, October 9th, 1945.
Cubs were losing back then too, huh?
The Cubs were losing. And they would go on to lose in Game 7, unfortunately, but because of the radio technology at the time, the soldiers on the ship were able to get news off the radio wire and then put it on, and we have these original documents. They are extremely, extremely fragile. But we have scanned them, we have preserved them, but this was the most fun for me because this is an accounting of what's going on the ship at the time. And not only did they produce one issue, which this is the first issue, they produced 2, 3, 4, 5 issues across their voyage on the ship. Incredibly, incredibly useful historical information. I just love this whole thing. And what I learned in the 5th edition, as they're getting close to home, they wanted to say, hey, for posterity, here are the men of the ship who were willing to tell us their story. They were in the Big Red 1, 1st Infantry Division, and served in Africa and Italy and France. They were in the 79th Infantry Division, the Cross of Lorraine, the 90th Infantry Division, the Tough Hombres, the 94th Division, Roosevelt's Bloody Butchers, okay, 102nd Infantry Division, the Ozarks, the 4th Armored Division, the Bastogne Saviors, and this is a personal item from my personal collection. This is a actual 4th Armored Infantry helmet that was passed on. My mother worked for a gentleman, his name is Jenkins, and his daughter said, hey, my dad doesn't want this, here, give it to your son. So I have this in the original metal cover, and that's one of my prized possessions. And it was very emotional for me reading that, knowing that I had that affinity for the helmet, and that men from the 4th Armored Division, maybe even the man that wore that helmet, were on the ship. So again, there were Distinguished Service Cross holders on the ship. There were many, 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 many Purple Hearts. If you look at these newspapers, Purple Heart, Purple Heart, Purple Heart, Silver Star, Bronze Star, unbelievable commendations for these soldiers. And there was one soldier who had a Purple Heart, 2 oak leaf clusters, and he was a gentleman that was Staff Sergeant Charles Lippitz from Baltimore, Maryland. He was the only person I could find a record of who was from Maryland on the ship. So again, Hoodwinks, just absolutely great. Not only did they have the paper, but they had some really funny little cartoons at the time. So, oh, Horace, you dear, darling, I thought of you all the time. And he's giving her a Hershey bar. Well, the funny thing about that is Hershey bars were very ubiquitous. You might have had 40 Hershey bars if you were a soldier. So it wasn't Belgian chocolate. Let's just be honest. This was interesting because it says Nick Versteden, because the editor here is saying, hey, I've got to get this paper out, but all these guys are seasick, his writers, so that the paper was delayed in its 2nd issue. And again, here's a soldier coming home from war. Don't get excited, dear. It really belongs to the neighbors. And you know, where did this baby come from? So you started getting into their head at the time. This one's very good. Dearest, I feel so all alone without you. But yet, everybody in their bunks sleeping on the ship is thinking the same thing. And this one I haven't quite figured out, but I think I know where it's going. But dear, I thought zigzag was a dance. And zigzag is what you're supposed to do in a ship, or zigzagging from bullets. I don't know what was going on. I haven't quite figured that one out yet, but again, that was it. So one of the great things that I learned was not only did they have our books and our albums and this camaraderie of their fellow soldier, they're very excited. You can imagine they're leaving war, they're coming home. But they were able to watch films on the ship. So they brought them up on deck. The weather was good enough. I guess it was dark enough. They put a projector together, and the film that they watched was Charles Lawton, The Man from Down Under, a comedy action. And interestingly enough, one of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life. Donna Reed was in the movie. But what was interestingly reported in Hoodwinks is that the film at the time, you never could watch a movie all the way through. They had to change the reel, so you can imagine the ship's going like this, and they're trying to change the reel, so there's probably like a 3D, Atmos effect. People are paying good money to go see it today, and they're rocking and going back and forth. But they reported that, hey, guess what? Right in the middle of the film, our buddy Pluto showed up. I was thinking, what are they talking about, Pluto? Well, they're talking about Pluto from Disney, Disney's Pluto, because Pluto would do funny things, and that would cheer up the troops. But there was also a cartoon at the time that, again, this is speculation, but hopefully you'll bear with me here, because this is a highly ironic speculation. And it's that there was a cartoon made by Mel Blount. If you're familiar with him, he's the author of Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes. Well, he had a character that he created in the 1940s called Private Snafu. And Private Snafu would entertain the troops, but he was a little racy, so it had to be censored. Couldn't show it to the public. You could only show it to the troops in war, because they're hard men. They could deal with it, okay? So I just want to show you this. I'm not going to tell you why it's ironic, but I'd like you to figure it out. Unfortunately, Private Snafu, he can't get the tune quite right. He'd only talk to somebody from Hood. But he gets some help. He gets some help from a very strange individual. Poor Private Snafu. If he only knew the Hood College alma mater, he might have avoided, well, he would have been blown up a little bit. That was the irony. But isn't that incredible that, there's a very good chance, I did a little bit of research on this, that this was widely shown at this time of the war. So there's a very, very good chance that there's a lot more to it. It's called Booby Traps. So if you want to go and have a look at it on your own, I gave you the censored version. Okay. So again, the ship is continuing to go across the sea. Here it is, 1,100 miles, October 12th, 1945. It's continuing its trip, and I know this because of Hoodwinks. They're reporting that to me here in 2017. October 13th, 1945. It's getting ever closer, 730 miles away from home. Can you imagine the anticipation? They can almost see landfall. And the last issue of Hoodwinks has my favorite cartoon of all. And it shows the ship, and it says, hey fellas, give me a break. They're crawling off the ship, they're swimming off the ship, they're diving off the ship. Here's the reality. No one went into the loving arms of any loved one off the ship. They had to go into a camp, Camp Miles Standish. They had to be there at least 48 hours. So they had romantic thoughts of what was going to happen to them, but they hadn't probably talked to their duty officer about what was actually going to happen. But at least in their hearts, they were leaving their beloved SS Hood Victory and going on to American soil. So again, that was the trip, October 7th, 1945 to October 15th, 1945. And we do have in our archive a picture of the soldiers on the ship. Probably provided from somebody on the ship at the time. So I have authenticated this is, and if you look very closely at some of the patches, you can't see it very well in the triangles or the 29th Infantry Division patches, that is in fact some of the units that were reported in the Hoodwinks. So these two men, the captain of the ship, Louis Marangos, and President Henry Stair, they had an incredible correspondence with one another. The captain would send a letter to the president. The president would send a letter back to the captain. The captain would send another letter back to the president. And then this letter, which I'd like to read to you today, is the letter dated 22 October 1945 from Captain Marangos to President Stair. Dear Mr. Stair, I thought perhaps you would be interested in some of the facts of the Hood Victory's maiden voyage. We sailed from New York September 27, 1945, carrying 51 civilian passengers. Had a very pleasant, enjoyable voyage, arriving in Le Havre, France, October 6, 1945. On October 7, 1945, we embarked 1,972 officers and enlisted personnel of the 18th Armored Infantry Battalion and the 26th Tank Battalion. Our voyage home to Boston was most happy and successful to the extent we received the commendation of all personnel carried and of the embarkation officer, as well as for our splendid treatment of the soldiers. Our time on the voyage was record for Victory ships, 7 days, 11 hours. Average speed was 17.2 knots, which is better than what they said. 15 knots was what they said the ship should travel at. And 1,972 is the largest total carried to this date. Again, thanking you for your interest in our ship. With warmest personal regards to you and Mrs. Stair, I remain very truly yours, L.M. Marangos. So, incredible records that we had of the ship. As a historian, it's like gold when you find these records that absolutely tie to the thing that you're studying. It's great. So this is a little bit of a postulation on my part. As you research things, you find information, and sometimes that information, like who is Miriam Apple? That's not Miriam Apple, is not correct. But I'm really hoping, and I've started the research on this, but I'm not done yet, so I hope that you will understand that this is speculative on my part, but I think I have a lot of really good clues that might link this up to be true. I want to show you a video of a gentleman, very quickly, who was part of Victory ships in the 1940s, and let me just show you that video real quick.
I started out as a bus boy on a ship in 1936. And that's all I figured that they wouldn't let me go in the deck department or the engine department. But back in my head, and educated out here in the West, and my guy, the same guys that went to school with me, later on got to be
From California.
Engineers and fighter pilots and all that stuff, they still had me as a mess boy or a waiter. So I left the West Coast and went to the East Coast. See, now they had that over there, but it looked like it was kind of gradually kind of fading away because they had so many ships and so many seamen. Yeah, because I told them, I'm not going to die serving food. I want to get in the engine department. And the Coast Guard heard me, the unions heard me, and they give me my paper to get in the engine. That's how I got in the engine. But I have to serve in all of these officers so many years and listening to all the things that they had to say. Some of this stuff came by natural for me, you know. So as I progressed, I got a lot of this from the people that helped me. For everybody that tried to keep me down, there was 3 or 4 people who said, come on, Bill, you can make it. Hang in there, buddy, you know.
So, I want to read you a letter. This is dated almost 72 years ago. November 11th, 1945, the SS Hood Victory at Sea. To the faculty and student body of Hood College. To faculty and students, greetings. We, the members of the crew of the Hood Victory, wish to thank you for the splendid library. The library donated to you our ship that carries your name. No finer collection of books can be found on any ship in the U.S. Merchant Marine. The SS Hood Victory is now returning from the second trip to the European theater of war, carrying a full load of GIs during the maiden voyage as well as this one. We have been enjoying reading during our leisure hours the books you sent. Reading is a favorite pastime with seamen, and every crew member appreciates the selection. In return, we would like to give you an idea of the men that sail on the ship, on the maiden voyage. All of the crew are volunteers and members of the National War Maritime Union, with the exception of the officers, and veterans of years of war duty. Many are men who have been through bombings, torpedo shelling. We have many different races, colors, and creeds, and are proud of our job that has to help speed victory regardless of our losses. But our job is not done until every soldier is on U.S. soil. Again, we wish to express our sincere gratitude for your swell donation. Now we can keep reading while we keep on sailing. We remain very truly yours. William A. Jackson. So I have a belief that this man wrote this, the man that was in the, which is an incredible story if it's true. And the reason why I believe it is true, and he is now passed, he passed in 2012, is because he writes a letter in a way that I think others, in doing research of who would have been the chairperson was simply somebody who was willing to write a letter to the people. And I feel, reading this letter, I want this to be true, and this is again something that needs to be researched. I really want to believe that that letter that I wrote to you was from the man who did it. Because he, until his dying day in his 90s, was working on the Red Oak Victory out in California, restoring that museum ship. So he loved Victory ships, he served on many Victory ships. Now I need to go to the National Archives and find the record to confirm this speculation on my part. But thank you for at least indulging me for a moment. So I want to wrap up here very quickly. This is an important gentleman, because even though I had hoodwinks, I didn't have a lot of pictures of what was going on in the ship until I found Major William Prince of Morgantown, West Virginia. This is Major Prince in 1946 at Camp Cigarette in Le Havre, France, or Camp Philip Morris, as they called it. And this is him boarding the Hood Victory and taking pictures of his voyage on April 1st, 1946 on the Hood Victory. So thankfully for West Virginia University's archives and the photos of William Prince, we are able to see a little bit more of our ship. Here's the troops actually getting on the ship in Le Havre, France. These are the soldiers as they're leaving. Again on April 1st, this is them on deck. This is them at sea waving to another Victory ship. You know, good luck. And by the looks of it, it looks like it's a Liberty ship because they have a different front to it. Again, here's the ship, the guys on the ship smoking pipes and kind of spending their time as they could. I don't know that they were watching movies at this point, but they were probably watching movies. And it's not a great photo, but there's America. And again, that was a proud moment for these soldiers in April 1946. So what happened to our ship? It didn't just stop sailing the seven seas in 1947 when it left the Merchant Marine. It was sold, and first it was sold to a Panamanian company, and it was renamed